So we were thinking about considering the lilies. Some translations say flower. I love that Karen did say lilies because that is the word for it. Lilies often stand in for God's provision, for a sense of innocence, for a sense of a reminder of what is truly beautiful, and that's why we find it in this passage. Jesus talks about finding our treasures in heaven in a variety of different ways throughout the Gospels. This is a theme, you've heard it before. Luke's context, this context, for the language of a treasure in heaven is again different than Matthew. Again, different in Mark. In Mark, a man asks what he must do to inherit eternal life. In Luke, two brothers are in disagreement, again, over this inheritance in this moment. And so there's different ways of gathering in what it means to have your treasure in heaven. And how does a study in nature help us to reorient ourselves towards God and goodness? That's what this passage is sort of about. We did discuss last week's passage last Monday, and everyone had a tough time with what also is in this passage, which is sell all your possessions. Imagine just selling all your possessions, you know. That's what's being said here, but I want us to put it in the context of what we know about what Jesus is teaching about life and goodness and grace. And so we're supposed to study nature. It says, consider the lilies. Consider is a deep, thoughtful reverence. The Greek word is katanoa, and it means to think deeply or contemplate with great discernment. What does it mean for us to learn from nature? Ponder the petunias, if you will. Gaze at the garden. Help us see something that is true about God's kingdom, about who we are, about who God is. And I think one of the things today that reminds us is that we are only guaranteed this day today. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. I know we don't love to think about that stuff, but as we have had loss in our community over the last few years in particular, we're very aware of that. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so what does it mean for us to consider the lilies? What do our treasures have to do with the lilies? What do we learn from the lilies? Well, we know a few things about plants, and it's been fun because I know we, meaning the royal we of people, not me doing it, planted around so that we have beauty around it. So if you come Easter, there'll be beautiful flowers, unless it snows weirdly here, and we have no control over that. But I don't know if you've noticed that during the winter, I thought, oh my gosh, all those things have died. But if you walk out, as you come in again through the door, do you notice the things budding up? They survived the winter. And what do we learn from that? What do we understand about the resilience of nature? They transform, but they don't hoard, right? You don't see the bulbs trying to knock each other off to get their good sun, right? No one kicks each other. No lily goes, not you, Lily, I'm the lily, right? They grow tall, but they have no need for metal or stabilization. They have no malice or cruel intent. They just do what they're programmed to do from the inside out. They seek to flourish. They can flourish in a group or in a community or individually. And again, they don't kick their neighbor aside to get the good sun. And the ravens, the birds, we learn focus, intentionality. I don't know about you, but I watched Shonda Rhimes' new show. I always do. I highly advise it. It's called The Residence. Did anyone see it? It came out last week. So very good. She's a clever detective, which I always love clever detective shows. So it's Detective Cup, and she's fascinated by birds. So not only is she trying to solve a murder that happened in the White House, which is where this takes place, not the current White House, but not a dissimilar White House, I would say. And she's a birder, so she gets, caught up in looking at the birds. She's at the White House, which is a rare thing to be, and so she wants to see what birds kind of show up in this area. So she's fascinated by birds. And she says the reason she's fascinated by birds is this. It is their singular focus. And as a detective, what she believes her superpower is as a detective is that she is able to push everything aside and focus on what happened. What's in this room? Who is that person? And so birds are successful in grabbing the fish from the ocean or the grubs or the bugs from the ground, not because they're pushing other birds aside, but because they have a singular focus. When a bird is seeking out food and sustenance, It isn't multitasking. Not that there's anything wrong with multitasking, but they're looking right at what it is. They're looking at it and they're focusing in on it. It's their laser focus and their ability to drown out distractions that she loves, which is why they're successful. They're successful when they hunt. Of course, birds don't practice, although when they're little, they probably do. They don't study hunting. You don't see a bird with a book going, oh, I don't know, new tactic came in, on my iPad. Flowers don't care what others think. They simply grow. Again, birds feed themselves by being focused. That is it. Plants and animals, they may store up small amounts of food. I love the stories where they're kind of groups of things that hoard little things, right? So you have squirrels who put away nuts. Did you know the funny thing about squirrels? Trees are often built because they can't find their nuts. They hide them, and then they don't remember where they are. But most of the plant and animal life, they kind of just get the sustenance that they need, and then that's all. So you see, the beginning of this is this idea of hoarding, of this person being blessed with all this extra crops and stuff. And rather than saying, how can I help my neighbor who maybe didn't get blessed with these crops, what does he do instead? He just builds bigger barns. And as we all know, that's an imperfect metaphor because crops won't last forever, although I'm not a farmer. Bruce, is that correct?
I'm in favor of bigger barns.
You're in favor of bigger barns, yeah. But things won't always last freshly, right? And if you have a big barn and then you go away the next day, where does all that go? Because I think hoarding is a sign of insecurity and singular focus of not having enough. Humans are greedy, animals tend to be instinctual, humans can be covetous, but plants don't compare themselves to others. And I think all we need to do is remind ourselves that Jesus is just telling us these are some lessons for us to learn. Where our treasure is, there is our heart also. We're meant to be generous in the same way nature has its own instinct for survival. If our treasures are only in things that will eventually rot and be destroyed, that is where our heart is, in stuff. Not in people, not in community, not in generosity. And with Trans Day of Visibility coming up tomorrow, and with all the transitions in our own community, this week, this cool devotional came to me. It was from the Still Speaking Writers Group devotionals. I don't know who gets them, but you should. Quinn Caldwell, who's a friend of mine, an ordained UCC minister, wrote this, and I thought it was a beautiful study in nature, and it's about butterflies. It's an image used, again, for resurrection, for Easter, for transformation. And he says this about butterflies. There's something you may not know. The metamorphosis that a caterpillar takes to become a butterfly is not an easy one. If the caterpillar itself doesn't draw out blueprints and can't imagine the butterfly it will become, its cells sure can, in a deep, deep level. Caterpillars are hardwired to change. As soon as the chrysalis closes and they emerge into it, that's really what it's called, in the form of a body, there's tiny structures called imaginal discs. Has anyone heard of imaginal discs? Imaginal discs form in the caterpillar's body. Inside these discs are the genome or blueprint of the butterfly that will emerge. We don't see it yet, but we know it's in there. Largely separate from the genome of the caterpillar. So the chrysalis forms, and the caterpillar has a genome or a blueprint for what the caterpillar looked like. And then inside the caterpillar is the blueprint or genome for what the butterfly will eventually look like. And what do you think happens in the chrysalis? They go to war. They go to war. The caterpillar's body sees the new thing as an invader. Its immune system attacks it. And the genetic image of the butterfly may be denied in this moment. But the imaginal discs, they keep coming. They come more and more and more. And eventually the caterpillar's immune system becomes overwhelmed by the sheer number of them. By then the struggle has basically liquefied the caterpillar's body. The imaginal discs then use the caterpillar soup to build a butterfly. Maintaining homeostasis is often the way to go. The way of least resistance in life, in our own lives, in the world. Usually the best way to survive is doing the thing that causes the least amount of consternation. And so even the caterpillar's body fights the process. right? Fighting liquefaction, because liquefaction is scary. It is scary to devolve into goo. But it's the process of evolving, isn't it? It's scary and painful and uncertain. That's also what makes a butterfly such a wonderful image. Again, we talk about transgender folks. Like, there is something that's always been there, a DNA moment that's always been there, because gender is complex and who we are is complex. And if you've ever met someone who's transgender and transitioned, you know that the real them is finally out. And it's beautiful. And it's brave and wonderful. We fight it, don't we? We tend to retreat within ourselves. This idea of becoming goo is very scary. Instinctually, we hoard. Instinctually, we want to go back. Instinctually, we fight it. We want to stop the process. Becoming a butterfly is beautiful, but it's scary. Sure, we could fly, but let's just say crawling. Crawling is so much easier. But what if the thing that you're fighting is the seed of your greatest transformation? Like the caterpillar, what if the thing that it's fighting is the seed, the genesis of its greatest transformation? What if the thing you're attacking so hard is the image of what you were always meant to be? What if the good news is, in the midst of goo, there's good news? Can we find the good in the goo, I like to say? Can we find a good in the glue? And there's something beautiful about becoming goo. It means we don't know quite what's happening, but we know that change is coming, something miraculous and beautiful. The process of change is not necessarily the end result of change itself. And so, my beloveds, as not only our community is changing, the world is changing, sometimes we internally are changing, don't be afraid of the goo. The goo is the messy, right before the actual beautiful butterfly comes out. And so I hope that we can all find the good news in the goo as we consider the lilies. Amen.